She runs a company. He just wants a job to feed his little girl. But that ring? It's not just jewelry. It's a secret she thought was buried forever. In the lobby, a child whispers, "You look like my mommy." Old guilt wakes up. Office walls close in. A hidden past knocks on the boardroom door, linking the boss, the father, and a lost love she never faced. When pressure hits, warnings fly, and trust shatters. The truth behind that ring threatens to blow their lives apart. Second chances don't come easy. Not when pride has a price, and family is on the line. What happens when a torn application uncovers a bond written in blood and regret? Will she cling to power, or fight for the family she never knew she had? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sarah Care's executive suite, casting long shadows across Margot Delaney's immaculate desk. She sat perfectly poised in her leather chair. Her silver-streaked, dark hair pulled back in a sleek chignon, not a strand out of place. The stack of applications before her represented the latest batch of maintenance supervisor candidates. Juliet stood quietly at her side, tablet in hand, ready to note any decisions. After 20 years as Margot's assistant, she knew her boss's exacting standards well. "Next," Margot said crisply, setting aside another rejection. Her manicured fingers moved with practiced efficiency through the pile. "There are still quite a few to review," Juliet mentioned softly. "Perhaps we should consider—" "Quality cannot be rushed," Margot cut in, her tone leaving no room for debate. She picked up the next application and frowned. Unlike the crisp, professionally printed resumes she'd been reviewing, this one was handwritten on wrinkled paper that showed signs of having been folded multiple times. "What is this?" she asked, holding the offending document between thumb and forefinger as if it might contaminate her desk. Juliet leaned in to look. "That would be Daniel Hale's application, Ms. Delaney. He dropped it off personally yesterday." Margot's lip curled slightly as she scanned the messy handwriting. "Maintenance supervisor position requires attention to detail and professional standards. This," she paused, noting coffee stains on the corner of the paper. "This is practically an insult." Without another word, she tore the application cleanly in half, then in quarters, letting the pieces flutter into her wastebasket. "Really, Juliet, we need to screen these better. Our time is valuable." "Of course, Ms. Delaney," Juliet replied, though Margot caught the slight hesitation in her voice. The intercom buzzed, and security's voice crackled through. "Ms. Delaney? We have a situation in the lobby." Margot pressed the response button with an impatient sigh. "What kind of situation?" "There's an applicant here who's refusing to leave without speaking to you. Says he needs 5 minutes of your time." Mr. Hale." Margot's eyes flickered to the wastebasket. "Have him removed. He's being very polite about it, ma'am. Just standing there, saying he'll wait as long as it takes. Some of the clients are starting to notice." Margot drummed her fingers on the desk, considering. A scene in the lobby would be far more disruptive than 5 minutes of her time. "Fine, send him up. But security escorts him the entire way." "Yes, ma'am." Juliet shifted uncomfortably. "Would you like me to stay?" "No need. This won't take long." Margot straightened a few items on her desk, ensuring everything was perfectly aligned. Minutes later, a knock at her door announced their arrival. "Come in," she called, not bothering to look up from the papers she'd pretended to be reviewing. The man who entered moved with quiet confidence despite his worn appearance. His clothes were clean but showed signs of age: jeans with faded knees, work boots that had seen better days, and a simple button-down shirt that had been carefully pressed. He stood straight, with the bearing of someone used to attention, though nothing about him suggested he belonged in this pristine corporate environment. "Thank you for seeing me, Ms. Delaney," he said, his voice steady and respectful. "I'm Daniel Hale." Margot finally looked up, her expression carefully neutral. "You have 5 minutes, Mr. Hale. I suggest you use them wisely." He nodded, remaining standing since she hadn't offered him a seat. "I wanted to explain about the resume. My printer broke down last week, and with bills being what they are, I couldn't afford to replace it right away or pay for copies at the library. I know it's not professional, but I needed to submit something before the deadline." Mr. Hale, Margot interrupted, while I appreciate your determination, this position requires attention to detail and professional standards that your application clearly didn't meet. I understand that, he replied, maintaining his composure. But I also have 15 years of maintenance experience, including system operations for military facilities. I'm certified in HVAC repair, electrical systems, and industrial safety protocols. I'm a hard worker who shows up early and stays late when needed. Something about his steady manner made Margot pause. Most people wilted under her cool stare, but Daniel Hale stood there, humble yet unwavering. It was intriguing. Why this position, Mr. Hale? Your military background suggests you could find more suitable employment elsewhere. He shifted slightly, and as he gestured with his hands to emphasize his point, something caught Margot's eye. The truth is, I need stable hours. I'm a single father, and my daughter— But Margot wasn't listening anymore. Her attention had locked onto his left hand, specifically the wedding ring he wore. Not just any ring. Her throat went dry as she recognized the distinctive pattern of the engraving, the unique way the metal had been worked into delicate swirls around a central design. It was impossible. That ring, she had personally commissioned it years ago, had spent weeks working with the jeweler to create something unique, something that would capture her sister Sarah's artistic spirit. Had given it to her sister as a peace offering, only to have it thrown back in her face during their final argument. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Sound became distant, as if she were underwater. She could see Daniel Hale's lips moving, but couldn't process his words. All she could focus on was that ring. Sarah's ring, on this stranger's finger. Ms. Delaney? His voice finally broke through her shock. Are you all right? Margot realized she had gripped the edge of her desk, her knuckles white. With supreme effort, she forced her features back into their usual mask of control, though her heart was racing. That ring, she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. The wedding ring caught the afternoon light, and Margot's breath hitched. The simple gold band with its distinctive scrollwork was unmistakable. She had spent weeks working with the jeweler on that custom design. Her fingers trembled slightly as she gripped her desk's edge. Well, Mr. Hale, she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. Thank you for coming in to explain. She stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her coffee. We'll review your application and be in touch. Daniel looked slightly puzzled at her sudden shift in demeanor but nodded respectfully. I appreciate your time, Ms. Delaney. He turned to leave, and Margot watched his broad shoulders disappear through her office door, the ring glinting one final time as he gave a small wave. The moment the door clicked shut, Margot's practiced composure crumbled. She stumbled to her private office, fumbling with her keycard twice before managing to unlock it. The spacious corner office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows, felt suffocating. Her hands shook as she opened the bottom drawer of her desk, the one she kept locked at all times. Beneath a stack of old reports lay a worn manila envelope. Margot pulled it out and sank into her leather chair, spreading the contents across her desk with trembling fingers. There it was. The wedding photo she'd received in the mail years ago, no note attached. Just Sarah, radiant in a simple white dress, standing next to a younger Daniel Hale, the same ring clearly visible on his left hand as he held Sarah close. Margot touched the photo gently, tracing her sister's smiling face. Sarah's eyes sparkled with joy, the same way they used to when they were girls, before everything fell apart. Before Margot's harsh words and judgment drove a wedge between them that proved permanent. I'm so sorry, Margot whispered, her vision blurring. 8 years had passed since the accident that took Sarah's life, and the guilt still felt fresh. She hadn't even gone to the funeral, couldn't face the family she'd abandoned, couldn't bear to acknowledge the finality of never making things right. A knock at the door made her quickly wipe her eyes. Come in. Juliet entered with a stack of papers. The HR committee finished their initial review of maintenance supervisor candidates. They've narrowed it down to 3 finalists, all with extensive commercial building experience. She paused, noting Margot's reddened eyes, but tactfully saying nothing. Margot straightened in her chair, decision already made. Tell HR to create a new custodial position. Part-time to start. Offer it to Daniel Hale. Juliet blinked in surprise. Daniel Hale? the applicant from earlier, but he applied for the supervisor role and his experience is, she trailed off at Margot's expression. Yes, I'm aware. Margot's tone was clipped. Create the position. Salary at mid-range for custodial staff, full benefits package. I want him working here, where we can. Observe his capabilities. Of course, Ms. Delaney. Juliet hesitated. In 15 years, she'd never seen Margot intervene in hiring decisions, especially not for entry-level positions. Should I tell them you specifically requested? No, Margot cut her off. Handle it through normal channels. That will be all. After Juliet left, Margot stood and walked to the window. The city stretched out below her, gray buildings touching the clouds. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, still clutching Sarah's wedding photo. What are you doing here, Daniel Hale? She murmured, watching her breath fog the window. The morning sun cast long shadows across Sarah Care's gleaming lobby as Daniel Hale stepped through the automatic doors, his daughter's small hand wrapped tightly in his. He wore simple work clothes, clean but well worn, and carried a modest toolbox in his free hand. Lila, bright-eyed and wearing a purple backpack covered in butterflies, bounced slightly with each step. Remember what we talked about, sweetheart? Daniel's voice was gentle as he knelt to her level. Mrs. Peterson will pick you up in 10 minutes right here in the lobby. I know, Daddy. Lila's smile revealed a missing front tooth. And I'll be super good, and we'll do homework, and you'll get me after work. From her office on the top floor, Margot Delaney sat rigidly in her leather chair, eyes fixed on the security feed displayed on one of her monitors. The image was crystal clear. Daniel's careful movements, the tender way he straightened Lila's collar, the child's trusting expression. Something about their interaction made her throat tight. A receptionist approached them with a warm smile, and Margot increased the volume on her computer. Good morning. You must be Mr. Hale. The receptionist's voice crackled through the speaker. And who's this lovely young lady? This is my daughter, Lila. Daniel's hand rested protectively on the girl's shoulder. She's waiting for her friend's mom. As they chatted, Daniel's attention shifted to an elderly woman struggling with a wobbling lobby chair. Without hesitation, he excused himself and approached her. Ma'am, may I take a look at that chair? I noticed it's unstable. His voice was respectful, warm. Margot leaned closer to her screen. Daniel retrieved his toolbox, quickly identified a loose bolt, and had the chair fixed in minutes. The elderly woman's grateful smile made something in Margot's chest ache. Throughout the morning, Margot found herself returning to the security feed between meetings. She watched as Daniel moved through the building with quiet efficiency, greeting everyone with the same gentle respect regardless of their position. When the cafeteria worker dropped her tray, he was there to help clean up. When the printer jammed, he figured out the problem before IT arrived. Around noon, Margot observed Daniel discover a forgotten purse in the men's restroom. Without hesitation, he brought it directly to security. The owner, a visiting client, later confirmed nothing was missing, including several $100s in cash. Your new maintenance guy's a good one. Howard, the head of security, reported during his routine check-in. Been here 30 years, and you can tell the solid ones right away. Had a nice chat with him earlier about his little girl. He's raising her alone since his wife passed. Tough breaks, but you'd never know it from his attitude. Margot nodded stiffly, her manicured nails pressing into her palms beneath her desk. The afternoon crawled by in a haze of meetings and conference calls, but Margot's attention kept drifting. Every glimpse of Daniel on the security feed sent a jolt through her system, his careful movements so like Sarah's, his gentle smile hiding hints of old pain. At 3:45 p.m., Margot needed coffee. She deliberately chose the break room furthest from her office, hoping the walk would clear her head. Lost in thought, she rounded the corner too quickly and nearly collided with someone. Daniel stood there, a maintenance request form in his hand, his eyes widening slightly in recognition. For a moment, neither moved. This close, Margot could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, the slight worry lines around his mouth, the way he carried tension in his shoulders, just like Sarah used to. Ms. Delaney, He nodded politely, stepping aside. "Mr. Hale." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. They passed each other like ships in the night, professional and distant, but Margot felt the encounter like a physical weight in her chest. Hours later, Margot sat in her black Mercedes in the underground parking garage, engine off, watching the elevator through her tinted windows. She told herself she was just reviewing some emails on her phone, but when the elevator doors opened at 5:15 p.m., she couldn't pretend anymore. Daniel emerged, holding Lila's hand. The little girl skipped slightly, chattering about her day, her dark hair bouncing in the same way Sarah's used to. Daniel listened intently, nodding at all the right moments, his free hand carrying his toolbox. As they passed Margot's car, Lila suddenly turned and waved, directly at the tinted window where Margot sat frozen. The child's smile was pure Sarah, full of innocent joy, unaware of the complex web of history and heartache surrounding her. Margot remained motionless in her car long after they disappeared from view, her hands gripping the steering wheel, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. The afternoon sun streamed through Sarah Care's glass-walled lobby, now transformed into a bustling celebration space. Colorful balloons bobbed against the ceiling, and the usual pristine corporate atmosphere had given way to the cheerful chaos of the Employee Family Appreciation Day. Children's laughter echoed off the marble floors, mixing with the hum of dozens of conversations. Margot Delaney stood at the edge of the gathering, her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around a crystal water glass. She watched as toddlers wobbled past and older kids darted between groups of chatting adults. This wasn't her kind of event. She preferred the controlled environment of board meetings and strategic planning sessions. But as CEO, she had to make an appearance. She noticed Daniel Hale near the refreshment table, helping a young boy reach the fruit punch. Even in this casual setting, he maintained that quiet dignity she'd observed over the past few days. His daughter Lila twirled nearby in a blue polka-dot dress, her dark curls bouncing as she danced to the background music. "Mrs. Delaney?" Her assistant Juliet appeared at her elbow. "The staff would love if you'd say a few words." Margot smoothed her silk blouse. "Of course." She made her way to the small platform they'd set up, delivered a brief speech about family values and corporate community, then retreated back to her corner. The whole time, she found her eyes drawn to Daniel and Lila, the family she never knew existed. The celebration continued, and Margot noticed Lila playing tag with some other children. They weaved through the crowd, their excited shrieks filling the air. In the chaos of running bodies, Lila got separated from her playmates. Margot watched as the little girl looked around, confusion clouding her features when she couldn't spot her father. Instead of calling out, Lila did what many lost children do. She sought somewhere quiet and familiar. Having visited her father at work several times, she slipped away from the party and headed for the elevators. Margot noticed her absence first. She scanned the room, but couldn't find the familiar blue polka-dot dress among the crowd. With growing concern, she made her way to Daniel, who was helping clean up a spilled drink. "Mr. Hale," she said, keeping her voice steady, "have you seen Lila recently?" Daniel straightened immediately, his eyes sweeping the room. "She was just here." The worry in his voice made Margot's chest tighten. "I'll check upstairs," Margot offered, already moving toward the elevator. She knew the building's security system would have tracked which floor the elevator had stopped at. Her heels clicked against the marble as she rode up to the executive floor. The hallway was dim, most of the offices dark except for her own at the end, where a small light spilled out through the glass walls. Margot approached quietly and found Lila sitting in her large leather chair, small fingers tracing the edge of the desk. The girl looked up as Margot entered, but showed no fear, only curiosity. "Hello," Margot said softly, crouching down beside the chair despite her fitted pencil skirt. "Everyone's looking for you downstairs." Lila tilted her head, studying Margot's face with an intensity that felt familiar. It was the same way Sarah used to look at people, like she could see right through to their soul. The thought made Margot's throat tight. "You look like my mommy used to," Lila said suddenly, her voice clear and sweet. "Daddy says you're an angel." The words hit Margot like a physical blow. She gripped the arm of the chair to steady herself, trying to maintain her composure even as her heart thundered in her chest. The innocent observation carried so much weight. Had Daniel recognized her from old photos? Did he suspect who she was? "Let's get you back to your daddy," Margot managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "He must be worried." She held out her hand, and Lila took it without hesitation. The small, warm fingers wrapped trustingly around hers made Margot's eyes burn with unshed tears. This was Sarah's daughter, her niece, walking beside her as if it were the most natural thing in the world. They found Daniel near the security desk, his face tight with concern. When he spotted them, relief flooded his features. "Lila!" He rushed forward, scooping her up in his arms. "Where did you go, sweetheart?" "I found Mrs. Delaney's office," Lila said proudly. "It's pretty up there." Daniel turned to Margot, embarrassment and gratitude warring on his face. "I'm so sorry about this, Mrs. Delaney. She shouldn't have been wandering around upstairs." "It's fine," Margot said quickly, waving off his concern even as her hands trembled. "Children get lost sometimes. No harm done." She stepped back, needing distance from the scene that was threatening to overwhelm her. "Please, enjoy the rest of the party." She walked away before either of them could respond, her heels carrying her swiftly to her private elevator. Once inside, she leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths to steady herself. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the cleaning crew had erased all evidence of the party, Margot sat at her desk. Her computer screen glowed in the darkness as she accessed the company's personnel files. With trembling fingers, she pulled up Daniel Hale's emergency contact information. There it was, in stark black and white. Spouse: Sarah Hale, née Delaney, deceased. Margot stared at her sister's name until the letters blurred together. She'd hired her brother-in-law. She had a niece she'd never known about. And somewhere in this building, a little girl with Sarah's eyes thought she looked like an angel. The morning light filtered softly through the boardroom's tinted windows, casting long shadows across the polished table. Margot sat alone, her normally pristine posture slightly slumped as she scrolled through her phone. The blue glow illuminated her face in the dim room, highlighting the subtle trembling of her hand. Sarah Hale, in loving memory. Read the Facebook page header. Below it stretched years of posts, photos, and memories shared by friends and family, a digital shrine to the sister she'd pushed away. Her thumb hesitated over a photo posted by Daniel 3 months ago. Little Lila sat at a birthday table, 7 candles blazing on a homemade cake. Her smile was pure Sarah, the same dimples, the same light in her eyes. "Happy birthday to our little warrior," Daniel had written. "Mommy would be so proud of the beautiful, kind girl you're becoming." Margot's vision blurred. She blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. The timeline revealed more moments she'd missed. Lila's first day of school, dance recitals, quiet evenings of Daniel reading to her. And between the celebrations, raw posts about grief, Daniel struggling to explain death to a toddler, marking anniversaries alone, keeping Sarah's memory alive for their daughter. One post knocked the breath from her lungs. A hospital photo, dated just weeks before Sarah's accident. Her sister, exhausted but radiant, cradling a newborn Lila. Daniel's caption was simple: "The two loves of my life." "I have a niece," Margot whispered to the empty room. "I have a niece, and I never." She couldn't finish the sentence. Her email inbox held more ghosts. She'd never deleted Sarah's old messages, though she'd never opened them either. Pride and anger had built a wall too high to peek over. Now, with trembling fingers, she clicked the first one. "Dear Margot," Sarah had written. "I know you think I'm throwing my life away. But Daniel is a good man. His struggles don't make him weak. They've made him stronger, kinder. I wish you could see past his circumstances to who he really is." The words blurred as memory dragged her back 8 years to her sleek downtown condo. Sarah stood there, younger and full of life, trying to explain her choice to marry Daniel. "He's barely keeping it together," Margot had snapped. "A veteran with PTSD, working dead-end jobs? He'll drag you down with him. You're better than this." "Better than what?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Better than love? Better than choosing happiness over status? Better than settling for someone who'll be a burden, who can't give you the life you deserve?" "The life you think I deserve," Sarah had shot back. I'm not you, Margot. I don't need corner offices and designer labels to feel worthy. Then you're a fool, Margot had said coldly. Don't come crying to me when reality hits. Sarah's face had crumpled then, but she'd straightened her spine. I won't, she'd whispered, because you've made it clear. Your idea of success matters more than my happiness. She'd walked out. They never spoke again. A knock at the boardroom door yanked Margot back to the present. She quickly wiped her eyes, straightening papers she hadn't been reading. Come in, she called, her voice remarkably steady. Daniel entered, Lila's small hand in his. Morning, Miss Delaney. Security said you wanted to see us? Margot stood, smoothing her skirt. Yes. Thank you for coming early. Please, sit. They settled across from her, Daniel careful and contained, Lila swinging her feet beneath the chair. We're launching a new company initiative, Margot began, the lie falling easily from practiced lips. A mentorship program for children of single parents on staff. Educational support mainly. Daniel's brow furrowed slightly. That's generous, though I'm not sure why you'd want to meet with us personally about it. I noticed Lila reading in the break room yesterday, Margot said, which was true. She'd watched through her office window as the girl sounded out words in a worn library book. She seems bright, advanced for her age. Lila beamed. I can read chapter books. Daddy helps me with the hard words. That's wonderful. Margot's smile felt rusty but genuine. Actually, I used to teach reading before my current position. I'd be happy to work with Lila once a week, if you're comfortable with that. Daniel's expression turned guarded. That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose on your time. You must be incredibly busy. It would be my pleasure, Margot insisted, perhaps too quickly. She forced herself to slow down, to keep her voice professional. We can set up regular sessions in my office, just an hour after school, helping with homework or reading together. Lila bounced in her seat. Can we, Daddy? Please? Ms. Delaney has so many books in her office. I saw them yesterday. Daniel studied Margot's face, and for a moment she feared he saw through her, saw the desperation beneath her composed exterior, recognized something of Sarah in her features. But he only nodded slowly. If Lila wants to, and if you're sure it's no trouble, then yes, thank you. That's very generous. Yay! Lila clapped her hands. Can we start today? I brought my new library book. How about Wednesday afternoons? Margot suggested, her heart racing beneath her calm smile. We can make it a regular appointment. Wednesday works, Daniel agreed. He checked his watch and stood. We should get to our stations. Thank you again, Ms. Delaney. Thank you, Ms. Delaney, Lila echoed, practically glowing with excitement. Margot watched them go, father and daughter hand in hand. Through the glass walls, she saw Lila skipping beside Daniel, chattering animatedly. Just before they turned the corner, the little girl looked back and waved. Margot waved back, her hand shaking slightly. Then she sank into her chair, overwhelmed by the weight of what she'd set in motion. The autumn sun cast long shadows through Margot's kitchen window as she checked the casserole for the third time. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the oven temperature. The familiar scent of her mother's recipe, chicken, herbs, and cream, filled the spacious kitchen of her Victorian home. She glanced at the clock. 4:55 p.m. They would arrive in 5 minutes, if Daniel was as punctual as he was at work. Margot smoothed her casual sweater, feeling strangely vulnerable without her usual business attire. The dining room table was already set with 3 places, though she'd rearranged the settings twice. In the living room, children's books were stacked neatly on the coffee table. She'd spent hours selecting them, remembering which ones Sarah had loved when they were young. A soft knock at the door made her jump. Hi, Miss Delaney. Lila's bright voice carried through the entryway as Margot opened the door. The little girl wore a pink backpack and clutched a worn teddy bear. Hello, Lila. Margot smiled, then nodded to Daniel. Please, come in. Daniel stood awkwardly in his clean work clothes, hands in his pockets. Thanks for having us, Miss Delaney. Margot, please. She led them to the kitchen, where the casserole was just turning golden brown. I thought we might have dinner first, if you're hungry. It smells amazing in here, Lila twirled around the kitchen island, her eyes wide. Like magic! Margot pulled the casserole from the oven, setting it carefully on the counter. It's an old family recipe. I haven't made it in years, but I thought. Her voice trailed off as she noticed Daniel's expression. He was staring at the dish, his face pale. Sarah used to make this, he said quietly. Every Sunday. Lila bounced over, standing on tiptoes to peek at the casserole. Mommy's special dinner, with the crunchy stuff on top. Margot's hands shook as she served the portions. Yes, our mother taught us both. Sarah always made it better than I did. They settled around the dining room table, the overhead light casting a warm glow. Lila dug in immediately, making happy humming sounds. Daniel took small, careful bites, his eyes distant. This is perfect, he said finally. Exactly how she made it. Margot watched them eat, barely touching her own portion. After a while, Lila asked to be excused and settled in the living room corner with her teddy bear and a picture book. She loves to read, Daniel said, watching his daughter. Just like Sarah did. Sarah always had her nose in a book. Margot smiled faintly. She used to hide under the covers with a flashlight after bedtime. Mom would get so mad. She read to Lila every night, even in the hospital. Daniel's voice grew rough. He stared down at his empty plate. Margot's throat tightened. Daniel, what happened? With Sarah's illness? He was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the edge of his water glass. We didn't have insurance. I was between jobs, struggling with things from my time in service. PTSD, he swallowed hard. Sarah kept saying she was fine, just tired. By the time we got her to the free clinic, the infection had spread too far. Margot's chest ached. She was always stubborn about asking for help. I worked night shifts at a gas station after she passed, Daniel continued softly. Lila stayed with neighbors. I couldn't afford daycare. Some nights, when the PTSD was bad, I'd just sit in the parking lot and... He stopped, shaking his head. Sorry, you didn't ask for all that. No, please. Margot reached across the table, almost touching his hand before pulling back. I want to know. I should have known back then. They sat in heavy silence, broken only by the soft sound of Lila turning pages in her book. The evening light was fading outside, casting the room in deep blues and purples. She wrote you letters, Daniel said suddenly. She never sent them, but I found them after. They're in a box somewhere. Margot pressed her lips together, fighting tears. I wrote her letters too. Never sent them either. I was too proud, too sure I was right about everything. From the living room, Lila called out, Daddy, look, this book has a puppy like Grandma's. Daniel managed to smile. That's great, sweetheart. To Margot he added quietly, she doesn't remember much about Sarah, but sometimes little things trigger memories. They cleared the table together, working in companionable silence. As Daniel helped dry the dishes, he said, Thank you. For dinner. He gestured vaguely. This means a lot to Lila. After they left, Margot sat at her desk in the study. She pulled out an old leather journal she hadn't touched in 2 decades. With trembling fingers, she opened to a fresh page and wrote 2 simple words. Sarah, I'm sorry. The spring breeze rustled through the backyard as Daniel examined Margot's broken fence. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong forearms tanned by outdoor work. The wooden panels had rotted at the bottom, leaving an unsightly gap that bothered Margot every time she looked out her kitchen window. This isn't too bad, Daniel said, kneeling to get a better look. Got any spare lumber? Margot nodded, pointing to her garage. There should be some in there. The previous owner left quite a bit behind. While Daniel gathered the materials, Margot brought out 2 glasses of lemonade. It felt strange having someone else in her usually quiet backyard. Strange, but not unwelcome. Sarah would have loved this garden, Daniel remarked, taking a grateful sip. She always wanted to grow her own herbs. Margot settled into one of her patio chairs. She tried once, when we were teenagers, killed every single plant except the mint. That stuff grew like crazy. Daniel laughed, a warm sound that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Oh yeah, she told me about that. said she used the mint in everything for weeks just to prove she hadn't completely failed. Even that awful mint chocolate chip cake, Margot remembered, smiling despite herself. Wait, the one she made for your mom's birthday? Daniel's eyes widened. She used garden mint in that? It was horrible, Margot chuckled. Mom was so polite about it, but Sarah knew. She laughed about it for days afterward. Daniel picked up his tools and began working on the fence. The steady rhythm of his hammering filled the comfortable silence between them. Margot watched him work, noting how his movements were precise and careful, just like Sarah had been with her art. I brought something, Daniel said after a while, wiping his brow. It's in my truck. Would you like to see it? Margot nodded, curious. Daniel returned with a worn notebook, its edges soft from years of use. The cover was stained with flower fingerprints and coffee rings. Sarah's cookbook, he explained quietly, holding it out to her. She wrote down everything she learned, even the disasters. Margot's hands trembled slightly as she took it. Opening to a random page, she saw her sister's familiar handwriting, looping letters and little doodles in the margins. Recipe notes were scattered everywhere. Too much salt. Dad's favorite. Perfect for rainy days. Oh, Margot breathed, touching the pages gently. I haven't seen her writing in so long. Daniel returned to the fence, giving her a moment of privacy with the cookbook. Margot flipped through the pages, finding bits and pieces of her sister's life, documented between recipes for pot roast and apple pie. You know, Margot said after a while, her voice thoughtful, I became CEO thinking it would finally make our mother proud. Sarah never cared about that kind of validation. Daniel paused his work, listening. Mom had these expectations. Everything had to be perfect. I thought if I could just be successful enough, maybe she'd stop trying to control everything. Margot closed the cookbook carefully. Sarah chose a different path. She chose happiness. She talked about you, Daniel said softly, setting down his hammer. Said you were the strongest person she knew, but that you carried too much on your shoulders. Margot looked away, blinking rapidly. I was horrible to her. When she told me about you, about wanting a simple life, I said such cruel things. She forgave you, Daniel said simply. She understood why you pushed so hard for success. She just wished you could forgive yourself too. They worked together to finish the fence, sharing more stories as the afternoon wore on. Daniel told her about Sarah's attempts at making homemade pasta, how flour would end up everywhere. Margot remembered how Sarah used to sing while doing dishes, making up silly lyrics about soap bubbles. Later, they moved inside where Lila was doing her homework at the kitchen table. The little girl had grown comfortable in Margot's home, spreading her books and colored pencils across the polished surface. Can we have mac and cheese? Lila asked hopefully, looking up from her math problems. Daniel glanced at Margot apologetically, but she was already moving toward the kitchen. I think I have just the recipe, she said, picking up Sarah's cookbook. They cooked together, following Sarah's detailed instructions for her ultimate comfort mac. Lila helped grate the cheese while Daniel and Margot worked side by side at the stove. The kitchen filled with warm, familiar scents. After dinner, Lila curled up on Margot's plush couch with a book. Her eyes grew heavy as she tried to keep reading, the day's activities finally catching up with her. Margot watched her niece drift off to sleep, struck by how peaceful she looked, how much she resembled Sarah at that age. Daniel stood beside her, his voice quiet and sincere. Thank you, Margot, for giving us something good to look forward to. The morning sun filtered through Margot's living room windows, casting warm patches on the hardwood floor. Lila sat cross-legged on the plush carpet, her dark hair falling in waves just like Sarah's used to. She looked up at Margot with those familiar brown eyes that seemed to hold wisdom beyond her 7 years. Aunt Margie? The name still felt new and precious to Margot's ears. Can I see pictures of Mommy when she was little, like me? Margot's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't opened those albums in years. They sat in a chest in her study, carefully preserved but untouched, like artifacts from another life. Of course, sweetheart, let me get them. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the heavy leather-bound album from its resting place. The spine crackled as she opened it, releasing the scent of old paper and memories. Lila scooted closer as Margot settled onto the couch. "Here we are," Margot said softly, turning to the first page. "This is your mommy when she was just 5 years old." Lila gasped with delight. "She's wearing pigtails, just like I do sometimes." The photograph showed Sarah in their old backyard, grinning with missing front teeth, her hair in lopsided pigtails that Margot had helped tie. Their mother never had the patience for such things. "And look at this one." Margot pointed to another picture. "This is when we went to the beach. Your mom loved building sandcastles." Lila's small finger traced the edge of the photo. "Were you best friends?" The question hit Margot like a physical blow. "We were," she whispered. "For a very long time." They turned more pages together, Lila drinking in every detail. Then they came across a photograph that made both of them pause. Two girls, one tall and serious, the other, small and laughing, stood in matching Christmas dresses by a decorated tree. "That's you," Lila exclaimed. "You're holding Mommy's hand." Margot remembered that moment clearly. Sarah had been scared of the camera flash, so Margot had held her hand to keep her steady. Always the protector, until she wasn't. The sound of footsteps made them both look up. Daniel stood in the doorway, having come to pick up Lila. His eyes fixed on the photo album, and something in his expression changed. The color drained from his face. His hands began to shake, and his breathing became shallow and rapid. Margot recognized the signs immediately. She'd seen similar episodes in her father after he returned from overseas. "Lila, sweetie," Margot said calmly, though her heart was racing. "Could you go get your backpack from the study? We put it there earlier, remember?" The little girl nodded, sensing the shift in atmosphere but not understanding it. As soon as she left the room, Margot moved quickly to Daniel's side. "Daniel, look at me," she said firmly but gently. "You're safe. You're in my house. Lila is safe. Let's get some air." She guided him toward the back door, one hand steady on his elbow. The morning air was crisp and clean, and the small garden provided privacy from neighboring houses. Daniel's breathing was still erratic, his eyes unfocused. "I see it happening," he choked out. "Every time, the phone call, the hospital, her face." Margot's throat tightened. "Tell me," she whispered. "Tell me about that day." Daniel's words came in broken phrases. "She'd been sick. Thought it was just the flu. I was working double shifts. Shouldn't have left her alone." His voice cracked. "By the time I got her to the hospital, infection had spread. She kept asking for you." The last words hit Margot like a physical blow. A sob escaped her throat, the first time she'd cried in front of him. Years of carefully maintained composure crumbled like sand. "I'm sorry," she wept. "I'm so sorry, Daniel. I should have been there. I should have answered her calls. I was so stupid, so proud." They stood there in the morning light, both crying now, sharing their grief for the first time. Daniel's breathing slowly steadied, grounded by the shared pain. After a while, he wiped his eyes and looked at her directly. His voice was raw but steady. "You're the only person who knew her like I did. Please, don't disappear again." The morning sun cast long shadows through the glass walls of Sarah Care's executive floor. Margot sat at her desk, reviewing quarterly reports while occasionally glancing at her phone. A new photo from last night's reading session with Lila showed the little girl proudly holding up her completed homework. The intercom buzzed. "Ms. Delaney?" Juliet's voice carried an unusual edge. "Your mother is here." Margot's hand froze over the keyboard. "What?" "Mrs. Eleanor Delaney. She's already on her way up." Before Margot could respond, the office door swung open. Eleanor Delaney swept in, elegant in a tailored navy suit, her silver hair perfectly styled. She carried herself with the same regal bearing that had intimidated Margot throughout childhood. "Mother." Margot stood, smoothing her skirt. "This is unexpected, clearly." Eleanor's eyes swept the office, taking in every detail. "I had lunch with Regina Campbell yesterday. She mentioned you'd hired some maintenance worker." "And his child?" Margot's throat tightened. "Daniel. And yes, his daughter, Lila. Don't be coy, Margot. Eleanor's voice turned sharp. I know exactly who they are. What were you thinking? They're family, Margot said quietly. Family? Eleanor laughed, a brittle sound. That man took Sarah from us. She threw away everything, her education, her future, to play house with a broken soldier. That's not what happened. Margot's hands clenched at her sides. Sarah chose love. We're the ones who pushed her away. And now you're making the same mistake. Eleanor moved closer, her perfume heavy in the air. Getting involved with them? Teaching that child? You're the CEO of a major corporation, not some replacement mother. Lila is my niece. Margot's voice strengthened. She's Sarah's daughter, and Daniel is one of the most honorable men I've ever met. Honorable? Eleanor's lip curled. He couldn't even provide proper medical care for Sarah when she got sick. If she had stayed with us— Stop it! Margot slammed her hand on the desk. Sarah died because we abandoned her. Because I abandoned her. Daniel worked 3 jobs trying to pay for treatments. He loved her more than we ever did. Love doesn't pay bills, Margot. You built this company to rise above that kind of life, and now you're what, playing family with Sarah's leftovers? Get out. Margot's voice was ice. You don't get to come here and judge them. Daniel is twice the person we are. And Lila? Her voice caught. She's perfect. She's everything Sarah was. Kind, brave, full of light. I won't let you poison that. You can't make up for what you did to Sarah with charity. Eleanor spat. That's all this is. Guilt and misplaced redemption. It's called love, Mother. Something you never understood. Margot walked to the door and held it open. Please, leave. And don't come back. Eleanor gathered her purse, her movements precise and controlled. When this ends badly, and it will, don't come crying to me. She paused at the door. Sarah was weak. She chose feelings over success. I thought you were different. Sarah was strong, Margot said. She chose happiness over empty achievements. I'm only sorry it took me this long to understand that. As Eleanor's heels clicked down the hallway, Margot sagged against her desk. She closed her eyes, fighting back tears. A small sound made her look up. Daniel stood in the doorway, a maintenance cart beside him. His face was pale, his eyes wide with understanding. Daniel! Margot stepped forward. You're Sarah's sister. His voice was hollow. All this time, the reading lessons, the dinners, you knew who we were from the beginning. I can explain. Explain what? Daniel's hands trembled slightly. How you watched us struggle for months. How you played with my daughter's feelings. Or how about explaining why you never came to Sarah's funeral? Please, Margot whispered. Let me. No. Daniel backed away. We've had enough charity from the Delaney family. He turned and walked quickly down the hall. Margot ran after him, her heels echoing on the marble floor. Daniel, wait. Please, it wasn't like that. But he didn't stop. He stepped into the elevator, his back straight and rigid. As the doors closed, Margot caught a glimpse of his face, hurt, betrayed, and so much like Sarah's had been the last time she'd seen her sister. The next morning, a resignation letter appeared on Margot's desk. The handwriting was neat and careful, just like the torn resume that had started everything. I hereby resign my position at SarahCare, effective immediately. Thank you for the opportunity, Daniel Hale. The mahogany desk felt colder than usual. Margot traced her fingers along its polished surface, stopping at the small scuff mark where Lila had once dropped her pencil case. The evening sun cast long shadows across her office floor, highlighting the empty chair where her niece used to sit, swinging her legs and practicing her cursive letters. Her eyes burned. She hadn't slept properly since Daniel left 3 days ago. The cookbook lay open on her desk. Sarah's cookbook, with its dog-eared pages and food stains. Daniel had forgotten it in his hurry to leave. Margot ran her hand over her sister's messy handwriting in the margins, little notes about adding extra garlic or reducing the cooking time. A piece of paper slipped from between the pages, yellowed with age, and fluttered to the floor. Margot's heart stopped when she recognized Sarah's handwriting on the envelope. It was addressed simply, "For Mom and Margot." With trembling fingers, she opened the sealed envelope. The paper inside was crisp, as if Sarah had written it yesterday, not years ago. Dear Mom and Margot, if you're reading this, something has probably happened to me. I hope that's not the case, but I needed to write this just in case. I know you both think I threw my life away, that marrying Daniel was a mistake, that I could have been so much more, but you never saw what I saw in him. His gentle heart, his endless capacity for love, his determination to be better than his circumstances. Yes, we struggled. Yes, there were nights I ate ramen, while my friends posted pictures from fancy restaurants. But I was happy. Really, truly happy. Tell Margot I forgive her. I never stopped loving her. I only hoped she'd see I found happiness. Love always, Sarah. Margot's vision blurred. She pressed her hand to her mouth, but couldn't stop the sob that escaped. Memories flooded back, sharp and vivid. Sarah at 6, sitting at their grandmother's piano, her small fingers picking out "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," while Margot turned the pages. Their shared bedroom, where they'd whisper secrets late into the night. Sarah always knew when Margot was awake, no matter how still she lay. Sarah's 10th birthday party, where she'd insisted on sharing her presents with Margot, because sisters share everything. The day Sarah graduated high school, beaming with pride as Margot straightened her cap. And then, the fight. The terrible words Margot had hurled at her sister about throwing away her potential. Sarah's tear-stained face as she walked out the door. I was wrong, Margot whispered to the empty office. I was so wrong, Sarah. She grabbed her coat and car keys, barely registering the concerned look from the night security guard as she rushed past. The GPS guided her through unfamiliar streets until she reached St. Michael's Community Center. The building was old, but well-maintained, its warm lights spilling onto the sidewalk. Through the window, Margot could see a circle of men sitting in folding chairs. Daniel stood at the front, speaking quietly, but with conviction. He looked tired but somehow stronger than he had in his janitor's uniform. Margot slipped inside, staying at the back of the room. The wood paneling and worn carpet muffled her heels. The hardest part, Daniel was saying, isn't the long hours or the empty bank account. It's the moments when your kid needs their mom, and you don't know how to fill that void. The other men nodded. One wiped his eyes. But we keep going, Daniel continued. We learn to braid hair. We figure out how to make Christmas special with homemade gifts. We become both mom and dad, not because we're perfect at it, but because our kids need us to try. Margot watched as he shared his story, their story, with these strangers who understood his struggle. She saw Sarah in his gentle manner, in the way he listened to each man's response with complete attention. The meeting ended with quiet thank yous and handshakes. As the men filed out, Margot took a deep breath and walked forward into the light. The community center's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as the support group meeting wound down. Metal folding chairs scraped against linoleum as the single fathers gathered their belongings, their quiet conversations echoing in the modest space. Daniel stood near the whiteboard, erasing the evening's discussion points with slow, methodical strokes. Margot's heels clicked against the floor as she stepped out of the shadows at the back of the room. Her usual corporate armor, designer suit, and perfect makeup felt out of place here among the coffee-stained cups and worn furniture. Several of the men turned to look, conversations falling silent. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept walking forward. Daniel's back stiffened as he sensed her presence, though he didn't turn around immediately. I owe everyone here an apology, Margot said, her voice carrying in the quiet room. Especially you, Daniel. He finally turned, his expression guarded but attentive. The other fathers paused their packing up, sensing something important was about to happen. I've spent my whole life judging people based on the wrong things, Margot continued, her voice growing stronger. I built walls with degrees and bank accounts, thinking they made me better than others. But standing here, seeing the real work you all do, being there for your children despite everything, I realize how wrong I've been. She took a deep breath, meeting Daniel's eyes directly. 8 years ago, I drove my sister away because I couldn't see past my own pride. I told her she was throwing her life away by choosing love over a career. By choosing you, Daniel. A few of the men exchanged glances, and one sat back down, sensing this was a moment that deserved witnessing. "Sarah was my little sister," Margot explained, her voice cracking slightly. "And instead of supporting her happiness, I let my judgment and shame keep me from being there when she needed me most. I missed her wedding. I missed Lila's birth. I missed." She paused, steadying herself. "I missed saying goodbye." Daniel's hands clenched at his sides, but he remained silent, listening. "When you came to my office that day with your resume, I did what I always do. I judged, based on appearance, on circumstances. I tore up your application without a second thought." Margot's voice filled with regret. "But then I saw Sarah's ring on your finger, and my whole world shifted. Instead of being honest, I hid behind my position. I watched you work with dignity and kindness. I saw how you raised Lila with such gentleness and strength." She turned to address the other fathers in the room. "I saw in all of you what I refused to see years ago, that true worth isn't measured in dollars or titles. It's measured in love, in showing up every day for your children, in building a community like this one." Turning back to Daniel, Margot's eyes welled with tears she didn't try to hide. "You gave Sarah a beautiful life. I was wrong about you and about her. She found real happiness, real love. And instead of celebrating that, I let my pride destroy our family." The room was completely silent now. One of the fathers wiped his eyes quickly with the back of his hand. Daniel's face softened slightly, though pain still lingered in his expression. He cleared his throat. "Why tell everyone this? Why here?" "Because shame grows in silence," Margot replied simply. "And because these men deserve to know that sometimes the people who judge them the harshest are the ones carrying the deepest regrets." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. "This is for Lila. Inside is a pressed flower from Sarah's garden, the one she planted at our childhood home, purple coneflower." "Your mommy's favorite," she said softly, placing it on the nearest table. Daniel looked at the envelope for a long moment before speaking. "I need time," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion, "to think about all this." Margot nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Of course. Take all the time you need." She turned to leave, then paused. "Thank you, all of you, for letting me speak. Sometimes the hardest person to face is yourself." She walked toward the exit, her steps slower now, more human. Just as she reached the door, her phone rang. The display showed Lila's name. "Aunt Margie?" Lila's sweet voice came through the speaker. "Can we come see you tomorrow?" Margot's eyes met Daniel's across the room. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Yes, sweetheart," Margot answered, a tear finally falling. "Yes, you can." The late spring evening wrapped Margot's backyard in golden light. She stood on her back porch, smoothing the checkered blanket she'd laid out on the grass for what felt like the 100th time. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the wicker picnic basket, making sure everything was perfect. The doorbell chimed, and her heart skipped. Taking a deep breath, she walked through her house to answer it. There they stood, Daniel in a casual blue shirt, looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him, and Lila in a yellow sundress, beaming up at her. "Aunt Margie!" Lila launched herself forward, wrapping her small arms around Margot's waist. The word aunt still made Margot's heart flutter. "Welcome, sweetheart," Margot said, hugging her back. She met Daniel's eyes over Lila's head. "I thought we could have dinner outside today. It's such a beautiful evening. We brought dessert." Daniel held up a paper bag. Lila insisted on making cookies. "I put chocolate chips and butterscotch in them," Lila announced proudly. Margot led them through the house to the backyard. The setting sun painted everything in warm honey tones, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine from her garden. Lila gasped when she saw the picnic setup. "It's just like the pictures," she exclaimed, "the ones where Mommy had picnics with you when you were little." Margot's throat tightened. She'd chosen the red and white checkered blanket deliberately, remembering those summer days with Sarah. "That's right, honey, your mom loved picnics." They settled on the blanket as Margot began unpacking the basket. She'd prepared all of Sarah's favorites: cucumber sandwiches with the crusts cut off, fresh strawberries, and the potato salad their grandmother had taught them to make. Daniel picked up a sandwich and smiled. Sarah used to make these exactly the same way. She'd always say she learned from her big sister. She was better at it than me, Margot admitted, watching Lila bite into one. She had the patience to get the cucumbers sliced just right. Not true. Daniel shook his head. She'd tell stories about how you taught her to cook. Said you were the only one who believed she could learn. They ate and talked, sharing memories of Sarah that made them laugh and cry in equal measure. Lila listened intently, soaking up every detail about her mother. Remember when she tried to teach me to dance for our wedding? Daniel chuckled. She was so patient, even when I kept stepping on her toes. That sounds just like her? Margot smiled, passing around napkins. When we were kids, she spent an entire summer teaching our neighbor's dog to sit. Mom said it was impossible, but Sarah never gave up. As the sun began to set, fireflies started appearing in the garden. Lila's eyes widened with wonder. "Can I catch them?" she asked excitedly. "Of course," Margot nodded. "Just be gentle with them." They watched as Lila ran around the yard, giggling and reaching for the glowing insects. Her joy was infectious, and Margot found herself smiling so much her cheeks hurt. "She has Sarah's laugh," Daniel said softly. "Sometimes I hear it, and forget to breathe for a second." Margot turned to look at him. In the fading light, she could see the mixture of love and loss in his eyes that she recognized from her own mirror. "I've been afraid," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Since Sarah died, I've been terrified of loving anyone else. Terrified of letting anyone close to Lila." He paused, watching his daughter dance among the fireflies. "But seeing you with her, watching you love her the way Sarah would have wanted, it's healing something I thought was broken forever." Tears welled in Margot's eyes. She reached over and squeezed his hand. "You both brought her back to me," she whispered. "I thought I'd lost her forever, but she's here in Lila's smile, in your stories, in these moments we're creating together." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Lila chase fireflies until the sky turned purple with dusk. When she finally tired herself out, she came back to the blanket and curled up between them. "I'm sleepy," she announced, her eyes already drooping. "Time for bed, I think," Daniel said, starting to gather their things. "Can Aunt Margie tuck me in?" Lila asked, looking between them hopefully. Daniel nodded, and Margot's heart swelled as she helped Lila up. They made their way inside, and Margot led her to the guest room she'd prepared specially for nights like this. The walls were painted a soft yellow, Sarah's favorite color, and a small nightlight cast star shapes on the ceiling. Lila climbed into bed, and Margot pulled the covers up to her chin. As she smoothed back Lila's hair, the little girl looked up at her with heavy-lidded eyes. "Aunt Margie?" "Yes, sweetheart?" Lila's voice was sleepy but clear as she whispered, "Mommy would have liked you." Golden afternoon light streamed through the windows of Margot's office as she watched Lila sound out a particularly challenging word. The little girl's brow furrowed in concentration, her finger trailing beneath each syllable. "Extraordinary," Lila pronounced carefully, then beamed up at her aunt. "Like you, Aunt Margie. Daddy says you're extraordinary." Margot's heart warmed at the casual mention of Daniel's praise. These past few weeks had brought changes she never expected. Daniel was thriving in his new role as facilities director, transforming the building's maintenance systems with the same quiet competence he brought to everything. "Speaking of your daddy," Margot said, glancing at her watch, "he should be finishing his staff meeting about now." As if on cue, a gentle knock sounded at her office door. Daniel stood there in his Navy maintenance uniform, now adorned with a silver director's badge. His eyes crinkled with warmth as he watched them. "How's our future novelist doing?" he asked, stepping inside. "She just conquered extraordinary," Margot reported proudly. "She's more than ready for the reading competition tomorrow." Lila bounced in her seat. "Can you both come, please?" Margot exchanged a look with Daniel. They'd been doing that more lately, sharing wordless conversations, understanding each other's thoughts with just a glance. "Wouldn't miss it for anything, sweetie," Daniel assured her. The next afternoon they sat together in the school auditorium. Margot noticed how the other parents whispered and pointed when they saw the elegant CEO sitting beside the maintenance director, both of them beaming like proud parents as Lila took the stage. The 7-year-old stood tall at the microphone, her voice clear and confident as she read her chosen passage, a story about a little girl who planted a garden in memory of her mother. Margot felt Daniel's hand slip into hers when Lila's voice caught slightly on the word, "Mommy." She squeezed back, offering silent support. When Lila won first place, her excited squeal echoed through the auditorium. She ran straight to them, medal bouncing against her chest, and threw herself into their joint embrace. "Mom would be so proud," Daniel whispered into his daughter's hair. "So very proud." Later that evening, as they celebrated with ice cream in Margot's garden, Daniel grew quiet. Lila had dozed off on the porch swing, her medal still gleaming around her neck. "I've been thinking," he said softly. "Tomorrow's the anniversary of Sarah's passing. Lila and I usually visit her grave, bring flowers, say a few words." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "Would you like to come with us?" Margot's breath caught. She'd never visited Sarah's grave, too consumed by guilt and regret. "Are you sure?" Daniel's eyes were gentle. "She was your sister, Margot. You deserve to say goodbye properly." The next morning dawned, clear and cool. They met at the cemetery gates, Margot clutching a bouquet of yellow roses, Sarah's favorite, and a folded piece of paper containing a poem she'd stayed up late writing. The headstone was simple but beautiful, carved with Sarah's full name and the words, "Beloved wife, mother, and sister." Margot's knees weakened at seeing that last word. She hadn't earned the right to be called Sarah's sister, not after everything. Lila placed her reading medal at the base of the stone. "Look what I won, Mommy," she said proudly. "Aunt Margie helped me practice every day." Daniel's hand found the small of Margot's back, steadying her, as emotion threatened to overwhelm her. "Would you like to read your poem?" he asked softly. Margot's hands trembled as she unfolded the paper. Her voice was barely above a whisper as she began, "Sister mine, with sunshine in your smile, I lost you twice. Once to pride, once to time. But in your child, I find you still, in gentle hearts that love and fill the empty spaces grief carved deep. Through her, your light will always keep." Tears rolled freely down her cheeks now. Daniel pulled her close, and Lila wrapped her arms around both their waists. They stood there as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Finally, they settled on a blanket near the grave, watching the sunset. Lila curled up between them, her head on Margot's lap, while Daniel held Margot's hand. The weight of years of unspoken grief lifted slowly, replaced by a peace none of them had felt in years. In the gathering dusk, with cricket songs rising around them, Margot felt Sarah's presence, not as a shadow of regret, but as a gentle blessing. Her sister had given her this gift. A chance to love and be loved again, to be part of a family bound not by obligation, but by choice and forgiveness. The late afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Saracare's newly renovated community center. Colorful balloons and ribbons decorated the space, and a banner hung prominently across the entrance. Single Parent Career Pathways Initiative. Building Better Futures Together. Margot stood before the mirror in her office, adjusting her navy blazer. Her hands trembled slightly as she pinned Sarah's old butterfly brooch to her lapel. The piece of jewelry had been returned to her by Daniel last week, found in one of Sarah's old memory boxes. "Are you ready, Ms. Delaney?" Juliet poked her head in, clipboard in hand. "Almost." Margot took a deep breath, touching the brooch one last time. "How many showed up?" "Over 200 single parents, ma'am. And the press is here too." The community center buzzed with energy. Rows of chairs filled with hopeful faces, mothers and fathers who had taken time off work, arranged childcare, or brought their little ones along. Some wore their best outfits, others came straight from their current jobs still in uniforms. Margot recognized several faces from past rejected applications. Daniel stood near the podium, wearing a crisp button-down shirt and dress pants instead of his usual work clothes. He was showing Lila how to hold the giant scissors for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. The 7-year-old wore a yellow dress that Sarah had sewn for her before she passed, carefully preserved all these years. "Ready, sweetheart?" Daniel asked, adjusting the scissors in Lila's small hands. "Ready, Daddy," Lila beamed, practicing the cutting motion they had rehearsed. Margot approached the podium, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. The room fell silent. She looked out at the sea of faces. People who, like Daniel once had, just needed someone to look past the surface and see their worth. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice clear and strong. 8 years ago, I made a terrible mistake. I judged someone's worth by the paper it was written on. I looked at a crumpled resume and saw only its flaws, not the story behind it. She paused, meeting Daniel's eyes across the room. "That mistake cost me years with my sister Sarah. It almost cost me the chance to know my beautiful niece, Lila. And it could have cost this company one of its most valuable leaders, Daniel Hale, our new Director of Facilities and Community Outreach." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Many knew Daniel's story by now, the veteran who started as a janitor and worked his way up, earning respect and friendship throughout the company. Today, we're launching the Single Parent Career Pathways Initiative in Sarah's memory. This program will provide job training, child care assistance, and career advancement opportunities to single parents in our community. Because sometimes, the most qualified candidates aren't the ones with perfect resumes. They're the ones who show up every day, who never stop trying, who put their children first. Lila watched her aunt with wide eyes, clutching the scissors. Daniel stood behind her, his hands on her shoulders, pride evident in his expression. Every participant will receive personalized mentoring, flexible scheduling, and access to our new on-site childcare center. Margot gestured to the newly constructed wing. We're also partnering with local colleges for continuing education programs, because second chances aren't just about employment, they're about building the life you dream of for yourself and your children. She stepped away from the podium and joined Daniel and Lila at the ribbon. Camera flashes went off as the little girl, with help from both adults, cut the bright red ribbon. The crowd applauded, and several parents wiped away tears. The ceremony transitioned into a reception. Families toured the child care center, while volunteers helped attendees fill out applications. Daniel moved through the crowd, sharing his story with others who saw themselves in his journey. Margot watched from a quiet corner as a young mother, with a sleeping toddler on her shoulder, filled out forms. Another woman in a waitress uniform rushed in after her shift, apologizing for being late. The Sarah Care staff welcomed everyone with warmth and respect, the way Sarah would have. "Ms. Delaney?" A man approached, holding his daughter's hand. "I just wanted to say thank you. I've been trying to find work that lets me be there for my little girl. This means everything." Margot knelt to the child's level, the way she'd learned from watching Sarah in old videos. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Maya," the girl whispered. "Well, Maya, I think you're going to love our new playroom while your daddy's working. Would you like to see it?" The child nodded eagerly, and Margot led them to the tour group. As she walked away, she heard the father whisper to his daughter, "See? I told you things would get better." The afternoon wore on, full of hope and new beginnings. As the crowd thinned, Daniel found Margot sitting alone, watching Lila play with some of the other children. "Sarah would be proud of you," he said softly, taking the seat beside her. Margot touched the butterfly brooch. "I hope so. I'm trying to be more like her, seeing the good in people, giving them chances to prove themselves." "You're doing more than that," Daniel smiled. "You're changing lives." Later that night, after the excitement had settled, Margot sat at her piano at home. Her fingers found the familiar keys of Sarah's favorite lullaby, a simple melody their mother had taught them as children. The same one Sarah had sung to Lila as a baby. Soft footsteps on the stairs made her pause. Lila sat on the steps in her pajamas, hugging her knees, listening quietly. The moonlight through the window cast a gentle glow, reminding Margot so much of Sarah, it made her heart ache with love instead of sadness. She continued playing, letting the sweet notes fill the house. For a moment, it felt like Sarah was there with them, in the music that had always brought them together, in the love that was finally healing old wounds and building new bridges. The summer evening painted Margot's backyard in warm golden light. Paper lanterns swayed gently in the breeze, strung between tall oak trees that had witnessed countless seasons of solitude. Now, they watched over a yard filled with laughter and life. Daniel stood at the grill, his sleeves rolled up, expertly flipping burgers while chatting with some of the dads from the career program. His eyes crinkled with genuine happiness, a sight that still made Margot's heart swell. The past year had softened the worried lines around his eyes, replaced them with laugh lines that appeared more and more frequently. "Uncle Mike, you're burning the hot dogs." Lila's voice rang out as she raced past, her sundress flying behind her like wings. Two other children chased her, playing an elaborate game that seemed to involve protecting imaginary castles in different corners of the yard. "Am not." Mike, one of the program's first graduates, called back with a chuckle. He'd become a regular at their gatherings, having worked his way up from janitor to maintenance supervisor at SarahCare. "These are perfectly caramelized." Margot sat at a picnic table, surrounded by women who'd found their footing through the Single-Parent Career Pathways Initiative. Maria, a former waitress now training as a medical billing specialist, wiped tears from her eyes as she finished her story. "I just never thought I'd be able to afford my son's insulin and rent in the same month," she said, squeezing Margot's hand. "The flexible schedule, the training, it changed everything." "Sarah would have loved this," Daniel said softly, appearing behind Margot with a plate of perfectly grilled vegetables. He set them down and rested his hand briefly on her shoulder. She always believed in second chances. The mention of her sister no longer brought that sharp stab of pain. Instead, it felt like a warm embrace, a gentle reminder of why they were all here. Margot watched as Lila showed her friends how to make daisy chains in the grass, her small fingers working with careful precision. "Remember when we thought we couldn't handle more than 10 participants?" Julie, Margot's assistant, laughed from across the table. "Now we're in 3 states." The program had grown beyond anyone's expectations. What started as a small initiative at SarahCare had bloomed into a comprehensive support system for single parents, offering flexible work hours, childcare assistance, and career development paths. Daniel's insight had been invaluable, helping shape policies that actually worked for families struggling to balance work and home life. As the sky deepened to purple, someone started playing guitar. The smell of grilled food and summer flowers filled the air. Children's laughter mixed with adult conversation created a symphony that made Margot's spacious backyard feel like the coziest home. "Aunt Margie," Lila called out, running over with grass-stained knees and flushed cheeks. "Can we have the surprise now?" Margot smiled, her heart still skipping whenever Lila called her that. "Of course, sweetheart. Help me get it?" They walked inside together, Lila's small hand in hers. In the living room, carefully wrapped in silver paper, sat the framed photograph. Margot had found it while going through old albums. She and Sarah, at about Lila's age, sitting at their grandmother's piano, heads bent together in laughter. Back outside, the guests gathered around as Lila unwrapped it. Daniel moved closer, his eyes growing soft as he recognized Sarah's young face. "That's your mommy," Margot explained, kneeling beside Lila. "She was 7, just like you are now. We were practicing for a recital, but we kept making silly mistakes and laughing instead." Lila traced the glass with her finger, studying the 2 young girls in the photo. "You both look so happy," she said thoughtfully. Then she turned to Margot, her eyes serious and wise beyond her years. "I'm glad God sent you to us. You're the angel Daddy talked about." The words hit Margot like a gentle wave, washing away the last traces of old guilt. She pulled Lila close, breathing in the sweet smell of sunshine and childhood that clung to her hair. Daniel's hand found her shoulder again, steady and warm. Around them, conversations continued in soft murmurs. Someone laughed. A child called out. The guitar player started a gentle melody. But in that moment, Margot felt suspended in time, holding her niece, supported by the man who had helped her learn to trust love again. The first stars appeared overhead, twinkling through the oak leaves. Lila ran off to show her friends the photo, proud to share this piece of her history. Daniel sat down beside Margot on the garden bench, their shoulders touching comfortably. "Thank you," he said quietly. For everything. Margot watched Lila explaining the photo to her friends, her small hands gesturing animatedly. She saw Sarah in every movement, the way she tilted her head, the quick flash of her smile. But she also saw something new growing, something that belonged entirely to this moment, this family they'd built from broken pieces. Looking up at the stars that now dotted the darkening sky, Margot felt a deep sense of peace settle over her. She thought of Sarah, not with regret or sadness, but with gratitude and love. In the gentle evening breeze, she could almost feel her sister's presence, blessing this gathering, this healing, this joy. "Thank you, Sarah," she whispered to the stars, "for trusting me to find them. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Margot Delaney, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.